This whole event is a product of co-production with many, many people coming together, bringing a raft of different experiences, lived experience, family experience, organisational experience, international experience as well. But it simply wouldn't have been possible without the support of the Health Service Executive, Ireland's National Public Health Service. So we're really, really pleased to introduce Yvonne O'Neill. Yvonne's National Director, working with the Health Service Executive, and has an extraordinary array of experience in this field and has been a passionate leader on a whole raft of different services right across the community-based services. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Yvonne O'Neill.
Morning, everybody. And I was going to say thanks, Martin, but I think Wilsey got a standard going that we have to say thanks, Mr. Rogan. Yeah. So thanks, Mr. Rogan, and thanks for the inputs this morning, which were extremely powerful and I know are giving us significant cause for thought and reflection. So Martin said I'm the National Director for Community Operations in the Health Service Executive. For those from the other jurisdictions that it's so good to have people here from, that means that we have responsibility for all health and social care services across the population of Ireland. And it is actually great that Ireland has one structure that does that, because I know for the jurisdictions the separation of the sort of acute hospital and the social care model, but obviously it leaves a complexity of scale which has its own challenges. So I was delighted to be asked actually to partake this morning, and I did want to say a big welcome, particularly to those who travelled, and I know that Alan referenced the inclement weather, so I was thinking actually of people who were travelling last night and wanting to apologise to you for having to arrive into the weather conditions, which in Ireland we call a soft day, and now I'm looking out and saying what we call the opposite, which is, God, it's roasting out there. So I had a friend who from Switzerland, and his first time coming to Ireland, he bought a travel book, travel guide, and the opening page said, if you don't like the weather in Ireland, wait 5 minutes. So I hope people get an opportunity to get out and explore a little as well while you're here. So I'm delighted that the HSE have been able to support and host, fund this event, because we've been collaborating with IIMHL and IIDL actually for a number of years now, and that's been an extremely beneficial collaboration for all of us in the way that we're able to exchange our experience and expertise, and we really look forward to our continued relationship and the continued collaboration. But more importantly, I'm delighted and actually sort of quite humbled that I'm getting the opportunity this morning to introduce two very empowered women, and who, from my knowledge and from my direct experience with one of them that's present, is that they have utilised that position at very senior levels of government to apply their passion to being able to champion the inclusivity and rights of all members of society, and that's sort of visible, I think, in what they've been able to drive, as we'll see, I think, in some of the inputs from Prime Minister Ardern, and also from what we know from our own homegrown Minister Rabbitte. So I'm going to start with introducing Prime Minister Ardern, and who's going to speak to us around the topic that we're addressing today on valuing inclusion, resilience and growth. And Prime Minister Ardern, who's been actually in place in that role since October 2017, and she became the country's 40th Prime Minister and actually the youngest Prime Minister in more than 150 years. In fact, the whole thing around age is getting a little bit scary now, standing up here, particularly when we were referencing 1963 so much earlier, which was the year I was born, and then I look at the age of these powerful women and I think, oh, what have I done with my life? So Prime Minister Ardern has been a long time advocate and supporter of valuing all groups in society in promoting inclusivity across her own country and indeed the world. Interestingly, while on a gap year back in 2005, she opted to work for 2.5 years, as it turned out, in the Cabinet Office of the British Prime Minister Tony Blair, where she served as an Associate Director for Better Regulation Executive, with the primary responsibility of improving the ways in which local authorities interact with small business. at the age of 28. She entered the House of Representatives as its youngest member. In her maiden speech, she called for the introduction of compulsory instruction in the Maori language in New Zealand schools, and she challenged the then New Zealand government for what she characterised as its shameful response to climate change, and also became her party spokesperson for youth affairs. And so just draw from one quote, which I think segues well into what we're going to hear directly from her shortly. When she was elected as Prime Minister, she reached out to all New Zealanders by saying, "We're living in an increasingly polarised world, a place where more and more people have lost the ability to see one another's point of view. I hope that in this election, New Zealand has shown that it is not about who we are. Thus, as a nation, we can listen and we can debate. After all, we're too small to lose sight of other people's perspective." And certainly for Ireland, I think there was a lot of resonance in that for us as a country, that we can get our arms around all groups and all members of society. So I think you're going to roll it there, Colette, for those who are old enough to remember.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. My apologies I can't join you in person today, but I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you in Ōtautahi and to those of you who have joined from around the globe. As leaders in the mental health and disability sectors, the work you do is incredibly important. This has been particularly clear through the unprecedented challenges of the past few years as we've worked together to protect one another. Inclusion, resilience and growth, the themes of the leadership exchange, are vital to the challenges we face today. We must ensure that every person has the opportunity to be included and belong, to participate and contribute, and ultimately to be enabled to live a good life. These goals are a priority for our government. Following He Ara Oranga, the government inquiry into mental health and addiction in 2018, we developed an ambitious work program to fundamentally transform the way we approach mental health and addiction in Aotearoa, New Zealand. The inquiry identified that here in New Zealand, an important missing piece of the puzzle was support for people with mild to moderate mental health and addiction needs. To address this, we're vastly expanding access to primary mental health and addiction services, putting support into general practices across the country, and creating targeted, community-based services for Māori, Pacific, youth and rainbow communities. And so far, we've delivered 500,000 sessions through this program. We're also supporting children through Mana Ake, our dedicated wellbeing and mental health support program in schools, and we're investing to grow our workforce. But we know that supporting the mental wellbeing of New Zealanders does not rest solely with the health system. This is why, through our wellbeing budgets and our wider work in housing, education and social development, our government is working hard to support the wellbeing of all New Zealanders. In the disability space, I'm very proud to say that we've established a new ministry, Whaikaha, the Ministry of Disabled People. Whaikaha will lead a true partnership between the disability community, Māori and government and help transform the disability system. We know that people must be at the centre of our policy development, that those it is about and their whānau must be part of the governance, planning and service development decisions. We can also learn from other countries and other experiences, just as you are doing through today's leadership exchange. I want to acknowledge the range of leaders participating here today for all of your work. It is life-changing. In Aotearoa, our sense of manaakitanga and kotahitanga, of care and unity, is deeply embedded in who we are, and you embody this. We know there is more to do, and none of us can do it alone. It's going to take all of us working together, but you have our full support and our commitment. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa.
Thanks. And I guess for those few minutes, we were hearing a lot of resonance with a number of the themes that are emerging from this morning about the power of what we can do together and in the way in which we do meaningful involvement with those with lived experience. And I think that's a really sort of resonant theme for the majority of what we heard this morning. So without ado, I'm going to move on to introduce and welcome Anne Rabbitte, who is a TD and Minister of State That's a TD, for those who don't know, is like equivalent of a Member of Parliament in Oscrailga. And she operates across 2 very large government departments, which of course will have very long names, so you'll have to bear with me. So we have the Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth, and we have all sorts of acronyms for that, but that mightn't be appropriate. And then we have the Department of Health with special and the Minister has special responsibility for disabilities within the Department of Health. Minister Rabbitte was elected in 2016 and re-elected again in 2020. She is a representative for the East Galway area, where the sun always shines in the west of Ireland. And following her re-election in 2020, Minister Rabbitte was appointed as Minister of State in that long-named Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth, and the Department of Health with special responsibility for disabilities. Minister Rabbitte is very passionate about sustainable social change and fit-for-purpose healthcare. So I'm using a quote directly to demonstrate that level of commitment, where she's saying that everyone should be empowered to earn a stable, healthy income through dignified work. And again, I think huge resonance with the way in which we talked about how employment for those with lived experience is so enabling. And she also had previously stated that no single approach or a one-size-fits-all is the right one for every individual. However, a created, tailored solution is always possible. And again, I think that's a really important message for what the mandate that we're given about the flexibility that's needed to deliver on inclusivity and resilience. So it's great that Minister Rabbitte's joining us today. She's no stranger to developing global alliances because very recently with the WHO, she has been strengthening Ireland's position on digital and assistive technology. And so it forms a sort of a further building block and input for the ongoing sort of collaboration that we can have across the world. So, Minister Rabbitte.
Good morning, everybody. I'm seeing this room from 2 angles. I sat at the back door when I came in initially, and it looked daunting, and it's equally as daunting from the front. So good morning, and thanks very much for joining us, and thank you, Yvonne, for the introduction. So I am the Minister of State with responsibility for disabilities, and may I welcome everyone from across Europe and beyond to this regional leadership exchange for mental health and disability leaders here in Dublin. We are delighted to be hosting the event in Ireland this year. This not only facilitates collaboration between member organisations, but also offers an opportunity for national organisations and departments to participate and contribute to discussion and outcomes of this forum through an exciting programme that enables us to share our experience and expertise with one another. And this is exactly what it is. I work within the Department of Health. Yvonne is the HSE. We also have all various organisations and departments from not just Ireland, but right across sitting here today. And we hope to learn from you, and I hope that you might pick up some schmidgens from ourselves as well as we go along. So the International Initiative for Disability Leadership, or IIDL, is a unique leadership forum that shares knowledge, innovation and effective practice support the vision for a full life in the community for all people with disability. The International Initiative for Mental Health Leadership, the IIMHL, brings together and connects mental health leaders to help spread innovation and best practice to improve mental health and addiction services around the globe. The key focus of the organisation is to create a global network of members that have access to a knowledge global community of mental health and disability leaders, professionals, experts and ambassadors for change. Throughout previous leadership exchanges, members have developed partnership and avenues of collaboration resulting in several types of information exchanges, all aimed at improving the lives of people with disabilities and their families. I sincerely welcome the important forum and acknowledge that there is much that Ireland can learn from its international colleagues while also making a valuable contribution. I recognise the importance of working collaboratively and learning from new different approaches being developed and applied elsewhere. I'm a firm believer that we don't always need to start the wheel over and over and over again. Sometimes we can short-circuit it, and that's what politicians try to do, is to short-circuit it, take on board the best practices elsewhere and get to the end result in a timely fashion, working in collaboration within our departments, working with the HSE, the service providers, but most importantly, the person at the centre, the person with the disability, and taking on board that team, nothing about us without us. So keeping in mind that such approaches often needed to be adapted to meet the requirements and constraints of different healthcare, community and social systems, the sharing of experience and wisdom through forums such as this can lead to better practices, better problem solving and better outcomes for persons with disability or mental health. I would like to thank the Mental Health Ireland for taking a leadership role with colleagues in the Health Service Executive, my department, the IIMHL European lead, Sean Russell, for bringing this event to fruition. As you have just seen with the welcome video from Prime Minister of New Zealand, Ms. Ardern, we have used technology to enable event and have a truly global feel. And I can tell you, this was one of the most nervous things I had to do this morning, was to follow the Prime Minister of New Zealand. She is really fantastic when it comes to being that person challenging the change, being to the forefront of expecting more from her nation, her people, to deliver that change. And to me, she's a real role model that I look up to, and it was fantastic that she was part of our platform here this morning, Yvonne. I would also like to acknowledge our Taoiseach Micheál Martin, who has a particular interest in this area, for opening this event and for continuing to prioritise the needs of those with disabilities and mental health requirements in Ireland. And over the course of the next 2 days, there are a number of fascinating talks from emerging leaders in both mental health and disability. And just to put it in context, I know my colleague, Minister Butler, is joining you here tomorrow. So the Taoiseach chose both of us for our particular roles, me within disabilities and Minister Butler within mental health. When you hear her speak, and you'll hear, hopefully, you feel my little bit of passion, you will understand why he put us in these roles. He put us in these roles because we find it hard to take no for an answer to start with. But we also like to push the boundaries while working in collaboration with everybody that can bring the best thought process to the front. He also put me in the role with one task. That was to remove disability from within the Department of Health and bring it to the long-winded name, which I call the Department of Equality. We all have health issues, including people with disabilities. But having it set within the Department of Equality, we make disabilities a rights issue. That was my sole job. I am 2 years and 3 months in the job. I have now gathered the money. The legislation is passed within our Dáil, and our members of understanding with the health executive are being put in place. I am ready to transition. Tomorrow, my Assistant Secretary General within the Department of Equality joins you here tomorrow, and I am ready to take the step out of health into equality and put disabilities on an equal rights, on a rights-based platform here in Ireland. That will be my legacy whenever I leave office, but it is testament of the Taoiseach's vision of wanting to make disabilities a rights piece. So when you hear So when you hear Minister Butler speak tomorrow, you will understand why he made her Minister for Mental Health. So talks cover topics such as the need to be flexible and fluid services that put individuals at the centre of decision-making processes, the psychosocial model, the social crisis within the climate crisis, the building bridges across mental health and disability employment. Across these diverse and fascinating areas, there is the shared thread of resilience and learning from the experiences of those with mental health and disabilities. My department understands that more engagement and inclusion leads to deeper insight and better decision-making at the policy level. The IIMHL and the IIDL have worked to ensure that there are strong elements of disability in the agenda. You will see how innovation in employment and supported employment programmes are bringing good work through opportunities to people with disabilities, not only creating a sense of value, but also helping people live a fulfilling life in their communities, a fulfilling life of their choice, a fulfilling life to ensure that they can live the best possible life that they chose to live. Breaking down the barriers of stigma is a key element, and driving this through emerging leaders in a way that we can start to change our futures. I am delighted to have the opportunity to share with you some insights on how we are developing and leading strategic policy changes in Ireland. And in tomorrow's session, you will hear from my officials and experts from my department, as well as the Health Service Executive. We acknowledge that there are significant challenges for individuals in our communities facing real inequalities. Putin's illegal war in Ukraine, the economic crisis, fuel poverty, increasing gap in health inequalities are real and present challenges. The impact on those more vulnerable in our societies is growing, and we need to work together to try and to make significant change. Collective action is a must. And as you can see from the event, you will find that inclusion, equality, resilience are core elements of its design. The programme for government in Ireland sets out our commitment to develop the implementation plan to coordinate implementation of Ireland's commitment under the UN CRPD. Development of this plan is underway and will involve extensive engagement and consultation with people with disabilities and their representative organisations. Ireland ratified the UNCRPD in March 2018, which was a strong signal to our commitment to improve the lives of disabled people in Ireland. It was an important milestone in a process to continually strengthen and raise awareness of their rights. As Minister of Disability, I am committed to continuous advancements of the rights contained in the UNCRPD in Ireland. Since ratification, Ireland has taken important steps to implement the UNCRPD through two overarching disability policy framework: the National Disability Inclusion Strategy, which we call for short the NDIS, and the Comprehensive Employment Strategy for People with Disabilities. One of the key changes this government has taken, and I have explained it to you, is that transfer of function. So by having the department moving into the disability moving into the Department of Equality, and I chairing the NDIS and the follow-on implementation plan, it means my role now is to hold all departments to account. So people with disabilities have a right to employment, a right to education, further education, a right to transport, a right to housing. So as Minister of State, my job is to hold those departments to account. As part of the implementation plan, it is my job to ensure that our implementation plan for the UNCRPD hits all those bars. It actually cannot be just a traffic light system. It actually has to have meaning. It has to have delivery, and it has to have timing. It has to be real, And if we're true to the value of the UNCRPD, the person at the centre will feel the benefit. That's why the comprehensive employment strategy that sits under the chair of Fergus Finlay here, we talk about increasing persons with disabilities' right of participation in employment, because we're very low in Ireland, let's be honest with you, we're 3%. Our goal is to increase that and double it to 6%, and we're actually putting that into legislation. We're going to make it law. But I cannot be asking just the private sector to do that. I think it has to start within our own departments, then it has to start within our own agencies. And then I can hold the public, the private sector to account. But let's lead by example. That's where we need to start it. So the comprehensive employment strategy has done some phenomenal work, but the next iteration of it is where we should see real delivery in the communities, real delivery right across departments, but real delivery for the person with the disability who wishes to participate in their community in employment. And employment has to be meaningful. It actually has to be meaningful because we all know the poverty, how easy it is to fall into the poverty traps. So it actually has to have meaningful. It can't be tokenism. It's actually where a person selects to be educated, to be trained, to be valued, to have an input. That's real employment. That's where you feel valued. That's where you feel part of the community. Earlier, Yvonne spoke about my involvement with the WHO and my view on assistive technologies. And I'm going to finish on this because I have to thank a former colleague within the HSC, Dr. Cathal Morgan, who is now, he's now supported by Bernard O'Regan, who is head of disabilities here in the room at the moment. They allowed me the opportunity to understand the real value of assistive technologies. But I also seen it myself, because I was able to engage as a newly elected minister on Zoom with persons with disabilities. And that was the most interesting part. So within the Department of Health, everything is WebEx, can't do Zoom. And within the Department of Equality, it's another platform, but it's not Zoom either. But one thing was for certain: if you want to engage, you find the platform that works. So Noel, my advisor, who is not here with me today, he bought us a professional account for Zoom. So it meant everybody could join my account. And that meant we could have open, honest engagement, participation, inclusion. And what we have learned is technology opened the world for people with disabilities. It brought it to another level. It brought participation. People could actually engage in employment because you weren't judged. Did you wheel in or did you hop in? You know, that is fact. Whereas in actual fact, when you were on the Zoom, you sat in the chair, you were judged for what you could actually contribute. And I think from that basis, along with Mac McLaughlin, we have partnered with the WHO, and for colleagues here in Ireland, you'll be glad to know it was a budgetary line. I secured the 4 million. We have the letter gone to the WHO, and we're going to take the next step. There's a real value here for Ireland in partnering with the WHO from an Ireland Inc. point of view. We have an awful lot of the multinationals that have a work base here, but we also have a great skill set. But we also have fantastic people who work within the HC, our disability providers, and actually persons with disabilities who can inform the change that needs to happen. And we can share that on a national and international platform, and I think we can make real changes. So thank you so much for having me here this morning. I really enjoyed my time, and Yvonne, thank you for the introductions. And it's wonderful to actually share the learning together, and thanks to all the previous contributors. I was here earlier in the morning. I thought the song from the lady and Brutal on Names was very, very powerful. I thought your presentation in relation to Manchester brought it very close to home in relation to Donegal in the last number of weeks. And to be quite honest, I think events like this have a real positive learning experience for all. So thank you very, very much, and enjoy your next day or two.
Thanks, Minister. There's so many threads, I think, in what Minister Rabbitte had to say, which resonated with the discussions that we were having, some of which you got to hear. But, I mean, the element of the sort of inclusivity, the fact that you're even referencing that the long-named department can be best represented as the Department of Equality. We're hugely supportive of that move actually from disability away from that sort of health model, and I do think that its cause and will be better supported, I think, with that under the banner. And I think the sort of the piece around resilience this morning was just so strong, certainly for me in my role and working with the teams across the HSE and the other government departments. There was huge insight where we could defensively say we think we've been doing work around lived experience and involving people, and what I heard clearly and need to reflect back on is really how well we're doing that and what that feels like for those who are participating or who feel that they're not getting to participate. So I do really value the opportunity to have heard so clearly from the contributors this morning, and Minister Rabbitte referenced Alan's contribution as well. And like Minister Rabbitte, I was thinking of the 10 people who passed away so tragically in Creasle and Donegal, a population of 400 people. So 10 is a small number, but it's a very large number for the people living in that community. And I've been involved in supporting some of the supports and psychosocial supports that we put in place, and I certainly would welcome engaging around what the potential might be for the learning. So I think again, I could say more about what we heard this morning, and I do think that we have many platforms now with the mandate from, and as Minister Rabbitte said, we'll hear from Minister Butler tomorrow, but we are given a very strong mandate, not just in policy terms, but in intention and collaboration in how we do our work to advance the things that we were hearing there, and resilience being sort of in that theme and coming out of the period of pandemic. I think resilience is just going to be a feature, and we're all going to interpret that or feel it differently. I'm actually going to quote Minister Rabbitte in a very recent interview on a newspaper. She described herself in a great Irish expression, which is, "I'm a tough old bird." And on Christmas Day in other jurisdictions that might like something like really bad, but actually here in Ireland it's a real sort of manifestation of like what we're going to do to prevail. And we will prevail was the terminology that Whimsy used earlier in one of his powerful pieces, and it's referenced in other ways as well, including from Tomas, and he like that invitation for involving people in the design. And there was a very strong message about that: allow those who lived experience do the design, and then we support the delivery, whereas maybe in some of that we've been getting that inversed, and I heard that very clearly, and it's certainly given me a mandate to go back to my team and look at how we might do that better. So thank you so much for the opportunity this morning, and thank you so much, Minister Rabbitte, for your involvement and your contribution.